attention closer, making it a comprehensive Mandarin language institute with learning Mandarin, then practicing your Mandarin through the Inchin app, and then taking you through to job opportunities. Professor Debraj Ghoshal is a full-time faculty at SP Jain Institute of Management and Research, Mumbai, since the past 5 years. Dr. Ghoshal has been teaching global strategy and international business and strategy. Prior to teaching, Dr. Ghoshal worked with India's best corporate houses, including the Tata Group, Reliance Industries, and Mahindra & Mahindra.
The number one thing you need to know is about the growth of the economy. So it's about 30 years they have grown by 8 to 9%. And because of that sheer growth, whole lot of foreign companies have landed up in China because of the huge FDI, the foreign direct investment which they received. So it's not just Indian company, but also a lot of MNCs from US, Europe, Japan, everybody's there. To start with, you should know at least a few words and sentences and mannerisms. And in China, it's also about how to use the chopstick. Also, it's all about how to read the body language. Because any business you do, negotiation will be part of it. And in negotiation, whole lot of cultural things come in play. It's not what is said, but also what is not said. And in those critical negotiations where multi-million-dollar deals are done. So I have done technology transfer, I have done huge deals, import, export, joint ventures, all those sort of things I've done for the Tata Group. And in those experiences, many a times that edge were our translators, our key people who know both the languages. Because many things are not said, but in the lunches and dinners where we are talking, and if somebody also understands the language well, a lot of clues are got which otherwise you don't get if you just know English. But you pursue your whatever you're doing, engineering, management, arts, commerce, whatever you're studying, study that well, and add it up, top it up with some new skill, like a Mandarin. And then when you are competing with people, and there is huge competition in India. So we are millions of people. You just look at the Three Idiots, or just look at admission into any good college. So it's about that little difference. And knowing a language could be that difference, which could get you that job in China. But other aspect is thousands of Chinese companies are not doing business in India. Or a lot of Indian companies importing Chinese parts or equipment. A whole lot of those manuals come, and then people are not able to install, or they are not able to do anything. So knowing those, even in India, a lot of companies are hiring people, maybe as freelancer, maybe as permanent, because whole lot of power plant equipments have come in, whole lot of other equipments have come in. Those installation, the Chinese come and stay here. So then working with them. So all of those opportunities are of course there. And on top of it, the third country, So whatever you learn about Chinese culture and language, which could also be used in a lot of Southeast Asia. Indians learn this and that, but also learn some language. And Mandarin being one of the more upcoming, because the economy in that country is coming up. So it's a huge opportunity. So thank you very much.
Mr. Santosh Pai is an international corporate lawyer and partner at Link Legal India Law Services. He is also Honorary Fellow, Institute of Chinese Studies in New Delhi, and member of the core group on China at the Confederation of Indian Industry.
So, as Professor Ghoshal was saying, China is all about the economy here. If you look at this, China is now the world's number 2, or in some respects already the number 1 economy. And where is India? India is 6. And in the next 5 to 10 years, which will mean, for most of us, the prime of our professional lives, India will only rise up and maybe reach number 3 or so in the next 10 years. And that will mean India will, along with China, will be among the top 3 economies in the world. And when this happens, whether it's bilateral or multilateral engagement is likely to increase, and is the same for businesses. Any business in this part of the world, in Asia, will be deeply entrenched in India and China. There's no sort of going around that. No one can deny that as Indian economy grows and Chinese consumption grows, trade will continue at a very significant level. Then coming to investment, most of you will be familiar with this picture, almost more than 50% of our unicorns in India have Chinese investors. So in the next 5 to 10 years, it will be time for all of them to find a place to list. And they may not go to the West because these internet-based models are much more appreciated in Asia. So they might get better valuations in Singapore, Hong Kong, or Shanghai. So that will again be a engine for enhanced business interaction. And the last piece of the puzzle, when you look at the global economy, is RCEP. RCEP is today the world's largest free trade area. It includes China and almost 14 to 15 other countries. So almost every country in Southeast Asia, including even Australia, is part of this. So why is this important? Many people say India is not part of RCEP. But my question is, India doesn't need to be part of RCEP. Any Indian company with global ambitions can set up their factories or offices in any of these 15 countries and take advantage of the free trade area. And I believe many Indian companies will do that. And when they do that, they will need Indian managers in the entire region. And as Professor Ghosal said, Chinese is not useful just in China. All across Southeast Asia, there will be a lot of career opportunities. Professor Ghosal called it the X factor. That's a very nice way to put it. But increasingly, if you look for promotions, you will find 100 engineers or 100 MBA graduates. But how do you distinguish between them? You need a leader who can manage across cultures, who has experience in different cultures. So the minute you say you have an additional skill, like Mandarin skill, you will immediately go into the top 5 or top 10 people who are looking for that growth. And I believe increasingly CEO's core skill will be managing cross-culturally, because you can always get a fantastic engineer, you can get a fantastic accountant. But if you want someone in the leadership position who understands much more than technical skills, who has insights into multiple cultures. So I think this is really the reason. Many people look at learning Mandarin as a stepping stone to a job. But I would say you need to think much more long term. And when you have finished 10, 15 years in a company or in a corporate career, if you want really promotions to the next level, that is where actually it will come into play in a much bigger way. So insights into a culture, especially through daily exposure, goes a really, really long way. In many ways, it's a very extremely valuable skill set. And for those of you who have chosen to attend this webinar today, I think downloading that app, which Nazia and Michelle have launched, I know both of them for more than 10 years. And I'm very, very confident that this will put you on the right track, put you on the right journey, that looking back, 10, 15 years down the line, you will remember this as the time when you took a right decision. So I strongly encourage all of you to embrace this adventure of learning a new language. And the app is fantastic. I saw some of it. It's very intuitive. It's very easy to learn. It's actually what today you need. You can't really expect professionals to sit in a classroom. So I think this app will really go a long way in enhancing your professional prospects.
Thank you so much, Santosh, for sharing not only your professional insight, but also your personal insights. But being a comprehensive institute, right, where you are able to learn Mandarin with us, you are able to then practice the language, and you are able to explore a lot of job opportunities that are available. If you are interested in looking up some of the job opportunities available between India and China, Engine Closer has also set up a new page on our website. Under services, we have corporate recruitments. You're welcome to go to that page to check out all the new jobs that are available for Mandarin language learners. You're free to apply for it yourself. We have written down the HSK level. So depending on what your Mandarin level is, please do go ahead and apply for the jobs. Now we'll be starting our panel discussion. We have my partner at Engine Closer, Michelle. Her Chinese name is Wang Xiaojie. She is going to be leading this panel discussion between Mr. Santosh Pai and Professor Ghosal. Hi, Xiaojie.
Okay. Hi, thank you, Nazia. Hi everyone. I'm Xiaojie, and I'm now currently based in Shanghai. It's very lovely to be connected with everyone online. And thank you so much for the great speech by Professor Dr. Gosha and Mr. Santosh Pai. I think for the audience here today, most of them are young professionals or even some students. So I think what they would really like to understand more, about on their personal level, what kind of advice can they take away from this session. I think the first question that we would like to understand a bit more from both of you is that I think you both mentioned that having a Mandarin skill as well as to top it up with some kind of other industry expertise would really help you to gain an edge in the career market. So could you maybe speak a bit deeper, in what particular kind of industries and what kind of functions do you think would really need this type of talent the most, and how can the young students or professionals to prepare for that?
If you look at a corporate setup, the kind of functions that would require Chinese skills or language skills per se would mainly be in business development, strategy, basically the kind of team which is looking for expansion, which is looking to add new customers, new suppliers, or in the service industry, where you have a project management role, where you're leading the client engagement. So these are the kind of functions in any large corporate like the Tata Group and so on. They will always be looking for people with this kind of cross-cultural skills, language included. And as I said previously, the industries, there's no limitation on that. So it's, you can't exclude any sector. I had to name a few sectors, so I named a few sectors, and basically there are 100 Indian companies in China. So the sectors I mentioned are basically those sectors. And there are about 1,200 to 1,500 Chinese companies operating in India. Whether they have a factory, whether they have made some investments, or whether they're just trading with India, they have some kind of a presence here. And apart from Indian companies in China and Chinese companies in India, like how Professor said, a lot of multinationals, ABB, Siemens, IBM, they all have a huge presence in China, and a lot of their managers are Indians, because Indians are able to, they've grown up in a very diverse society. They're able to interact with people from different parts of the world, different cultures, and language is a feather in the cap. Very happy to settle down in China because you have a very good quality of life. You, of course, get to expose your kids to the language and culture. So I would say careers, the opportunities are endless. You can be working for an Indian company or a Chinese company or a MNC. You can be in China. You can be in Southeast Asia. So this is, you're covering almost half the world. And I just want to add one aspect. Why is Mandarin so special is because historically, India as a society, as a country, has underinvested in China. It's not just language. Any capability today, you can find a lot of people who will go to Europe and London. I mean, you will find 100 people from India at a drop of a hat who can go to London or New York and do some business deals. But you will be really surprised. A lot of Indian companies at the leadership level, at the CEO level, have told me if only they could find a handful of people, they would expand into China. So really, the human resource bottleneck is a real challenge. And if any of the young students who are listening to this want to create a sort of mark for themselves and create a really sort of booster for their career, this is a short way of doing it.
So if I can just add on, what he said, So other thing is the procurement. So India buys a whole lot of things from China. So the procurement department people who want to do negotiation, the pricing, so that's a big interface, with China. And again, in terms of, another aspect is many of the Chinese companies are doing a lot of merger acquisitions. And in those, areas, I see a lot of Indians. Because, Chinese are buying, German companies, American companies, and I see a lot of Indians managing those. Or, the other aspect is marketing branding. So there are a whole lot of market research, companies in China, and they're headed by Indian origin people. And if you look at the bigger trends, so China is an aging society. So they will not have young people to take up the huge growth. And like Japan, so China will also need to have a lot of expats coming in and working.
Can we also maybe talk a bit more about like the potential culture clashes that Indian students may face if they work at a Chinese company or work with a Chinese business? Like what kind of difficulties they might face? What should they be aware of or better prepared? If they want to work in this space.
Yeah, I think whole lot of what do you say, things to look at. If I reflect on my own journey. So I was one of the very young, person from Tata posted there. And I thought, what works in India would work in China. But I was wrong. Yeah. So things like, even in a meeting, so conducting a meeting with my colleagues. In India, when somebody asks something, everybody speaks, sabko bolna hai. But in China, when I had the meeting with my Chinese colleagues, nobody speaks in the meeting. So I thought, what's the problem? Is my English not okay? Is my face has some problem? I don't know what's, So they will not speak in public, So you need to understand that you have to speak to them, individually, and ask their opinion. Again, if you want to, scold your team members, don't ever do in public. The Chinese, face is very important. You have to say something harsh, call them separately, take them to a karaoke or, go for bowling and then say, you should improve this. Those are very, very important aspects of, India and China. And also the third thing is about detailed instructions. So if you want your Chinese colleague to do a great work, you have to give him A to B, B to C, C to D, everything you have to tell him in detail. And they will do fabulous work. But if you give a vague sort of instructions, they cannot work. So Indians, we are used to, vague working, but they have to be given very specific and one task at a time. Not too much of multitasking. Let them complete a task and then give a second task. And, they will do it very well. Also, after a lunch, my entire office, the lights are off, all are sleeping. I was amazed, in India, we don't even have, 5 minutes to have a lunch break, khate kaam karte rehte. But then initially I was very angry, but then I have to, pull down Devraj, this is what China is, And then after that, they work very productively. So you have to adjust to, whatever is the difference in the work culture in a country. It's just not China. Any country you work in, you have to respect, when in Rome, be like Romans. Don't try to, dictate, hey, this works like this. In India, you have to do like this. You will be utter failure. So adapt yourself. And those things, I would say is very important. Over to you, Santosh.
Okay. What I can add is, I think there's a lot of, in the corporate hierarchy, there's a lot of power distance in China, which essentially means information goes up. If you're a junior person, you just feed information to the management and then the decisions come down. So it's not a very holistic process. It's a linear process of decision making. So that's the power distance aspect of it. A lot of Indian managers who decide to work for Chinese companies feel a little bit of suffocated because if they have about 8 to 10 years of experience, they're normally used to a fair amount of flexibility in operations, management style, and stuff. They can do things on their own. But in a Chinese company, even if you have 15 to 20 years experience, you're normally taking instructions and then just getting things done. So that's something people will have to be prepared for. But again, these things are changing very quickly. There are a lot of companies in the internet industry where this is no longer true. But overall, from a cultural perspective, there are these kind of things. So there are exciting opportunities. There will be, of course, challenge because you're, in the pioneering role of the few Indian managers who are comfortable in the Chinese space. So there will be challenges, but it is nothing of the sort that, you have to shy away from. If you embrace these opportunities with an open mind, I'm pretty sure the average Indians, can deal with all of them. There's nothing so very, very difficult about anything that China has to present. It just takes an open mind and the ability to experiment and learn from your experience. That's very important because mistakes are completely fine. Foreigners in China make all sorts of mistakes, very expensive mistakes, So at a professional level, a few mistakes here and there is well worth the investment. It's far more valuable than, spending a lot of time getting degrees or advanced qualifications. If you just get exposure to China, that can also propel your career.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. In your talk, you both mentioned about the importance of reading body language in China. Could you each give me one example of a very interesting body language that you read in China?
Santosh said, lot of patience. Because I have been also in those 7-day, 10-day meetings when nothing is going. You repeat the same thing again and again, again and again. But you have to patiently again say those things. And never refuse a lunch and dinner if a Chinese customer supplier invites you for. But that's where the real negotiation happens. That's where we talk about Buddhism and Three Idiots and everything, and also talk price. So not everything happens in the meeting room, but a lot happens in the dinner and lunch room. So never miss out on that.
Biggest sort of learning has been that when you're speaking something, I think Chinese tend to notice a lot more context than the words that you're speaking, because normally in the Chinese setting, the words are already known. You're introducing your company or your business or some proposal that you have, or you're selling your product. So everyone knows that. But they're very keen to see how you're behaving, whether you have the kind of the trust that they can build with you, whether you're projecting confidence. And similarly, when you're speaking to Chinese and you're observing their body language, if you tend to see a lot of them being very sort of poker-faced, that obviously means that they were expecting something else. So you need to alter your messaging a little bit. You may not have to say everything. You can leave a lot of things unsaid, with a knowing glance that this is something we can tie up. So this is the kind of detail. So Indian CEOs tend to get into a lot of detail, and I have never seen a Chinese decision maker get into any detail. They will just say that I like you, or I like your company, we want to do something, very general space. And that is it. I mean, you can't expect a decision maker in China to come and spell out a proposal in detail, because that's not his job. I mean, he's got other people to do it. So if you are an Indian manager looking for that kind of clarity from a slightly higher senior management official, you might be disappointed. And if you show your disappointment, you've already lost the deal, because you haven't learned the rules of the game. So I think it is very important to observe body language, to recognize the roles that each person plays. Very often it's a team sport. In India, a promoter or a CEO will think that he can do anything he wants because he's the boss. But in China, even the bosses know that there are certain things they should not be doing. So you need to recognize that nuance and understand how to get your way by connecting at multiple levels. So you need to have a relationship with the CEO, and you need to have a relationship with the junior most person or the translator or anyone in that entire sort of team to actually get a sort of successful result. So I would say that.
Thank you. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Gosha and Mr. Pai. I would like to open the floor to questions. Nazia?
The first question is a little bit more specific to two particular industries. One is if you could mention the opportunities that are available for Mandarin speakers in the finance and international relations space. Professor, I think that's a little bit more up your alley, since you teach some of the students who are looking at these subjects.
Sure. So, so there are, Indian banks in China. There is the SBI, ICICI, Axis Bank. So those whole lot of banks are there. So that's, obviously one area to look at. And the other area is, now a lot of Indian companies are raising money from China. All the startup space, as Santosh said, they're all funded by the Chinese. So all those negotiation of the finance part, that happens. Also in the international relations. So all the government delegations which go, all the sort of trade delegations, CII, FICCI, SIAM, every Gems and Jewelry Association. So all of those people, when they go and meet some of their counterparts there, all the ambassador or the embassy people. So in all those areas, a lot of translators required. And now in my new role in the education space, so I have this whole lot of Chinese students from universities coming to India to learn something, doing business in India, or our students going and learning there, doing business in China. And the key for those success of the programs are those real-time translators.
There are a whole lot of think tanks today. I am also part of Institute of Chinese Studies, which is the oldest think tank on China in India. And a lot of think tanks continuously observe China. And if you want to work with one of these think tanks, Chinese skill is very valuable because you can access primary source material. You can actually take the words and interpret in a proper way rather than just relying on Google Translate or something. And also for China watching, for observing the Chinese economy or Chinese foreign policy or anything. Language is essential because Chinese is the official language of the Chinese government. So if anything else you're saying is from Western press, if you're relying on English sources, you're already you're not doing your best. If youngsters are willing to put up their hand and saying that I may not know too much of Mandarin, but I will spend the next 6 months learning Mandarin, I'm sure a lot of companies will say, if you can learn Mandarin, we will open up the whole world for you. So I think that's really, something I would like to emphasize on the audience here.
So exactly, guys, going between, trying to plug this gap, like you were talking about, Santosh, and saying that, when there was this large investment firm that actually set up in China and then try to decide, figure out how to operate in the country, right? Similarly, I mean, India and China also have a lot of opportunities between the two countries. But at the same time, there's a big gap in the language skills. We're not really able to communicate very easily with each other. We're not able to talk and really understand each other. It's basically one of the pillars that Incheon Closer was also established on, right? Is that if we're able to help Indians to understand Mandarin, to read and write Mandarin, hopefully the trust factor between the two countries will improve. Well, we've been operational for 11 years now, and maybe we've made like a drop in the ocean, but there are a whole lot of other Mandarin language firms that are also looking at teaching so many people Mandarin. But the gap between that continues. How do you think we can actually curb this gap? Do you think there are things that we as institutes can do that can help or empower more citizens to learn each other's languages so that we can be a little bit more trusting towards each other?
Yeah, I think the way to go is online. Because we have been all till now focusing on the physical classes, and that limits the expertise. But if there are online settings,
like the Incheon app.
Yeah. So anything to do with the new generation is super computer savvy, app savvy.
I'll just add something more, Nazia. I think.
Yep.
I think a lot of institutes, what they do is they take upon themselves the task of teaching every student the entire Mandarin language. And that, as you and I know, is a lifetime exercise. And I think where perhaps Incheon can play a slightly differentiated role is to, as you already showed in your video, you have some modules which are focused on, a few topics. Because from my experience, you don't need to know the whole language, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know Chinese, which is used by, say, diplomats or people like that. But I know what a lawyer needs when they meet a client. I can do a meeting, I can give a presentation and stuff like that. So I think a lot of students will be intimidated saying that HSK 4 means so many thousand characters and HSK 5 and 6 and so on. But the fact is, if you spend 2 or 3 months picking up vocabulary which is useful in your daily sort of activity, that's amazing. That's all you need. What can I download an app? If I can download an app and spend 10-20 minutes every day, that's good enough. You do it for 6 months, and everything that we have spoken about, career opportunities and all that will be offered to you. You don't need to do much more than that. That's my feeling.
Yeah, it's all about learning within a situation, right? Learning within a particular context and
Yes.
learning the words that you require for that particular context. So being practical about it as well, because it does, and we all know that. We've all learned this language and we know that it takes a long time to be perfect and to really know the language inside out, covering various facets. So that's very practical advice, Santosh. Thank you. Last question to wrap up everything. I'm going to give it a generic question. What are the 3 skill sets, according to you, that somebody would require besides Mandarin to be able to function in China? So it could be a personality trait, it could be a skill set, but what do you think would make for a successful professional in China?
So I would say open-mindedness is very
Yeah.
important, because if you carry any of the prejudice that you have as a result of your upbringing or something, if you take that, you have a disadvantage. And I would say a lot of patience and a lot of diligence, because I think as Indians, diligence is not our strong suit. We are,
Hmm.
very happy to spend 5 minutes reading something and saying that we know everything about it. But if you're a little more diligent, I think, and sorry, the fourth one I would say, which is for me personally the biggest lesson I learned from China, is humility. A lot of humility, because Indians, we are a very outspoken people. We are very outgoing, outspoken, aggressive sometimes, very confident of ourselves. And China, sometimes it's not useful. Sometimes it works against you. So I
Yeah.
have always learned to be extremely humble. I think, China is a great civilization which has a lot of strong things. But this is something at a very personal level. I meet a lot of chairmen of big listed companies and big SOEs, and to see how humble they are. I used to know a Chinese professor who retired as a vice minister, and he used to cycle around on campus in Tsinghua. And I said, in India, I can't imagine this. So, I think humility goes a long way. It's a very humane value which improves every human being. And especially for Indians interacting with China, if you learn consciously to be a little more humble about yourself, I think you'll be far more successful with Chinese or in China.
Is, so number one thing is look at the long term. Yeah. So don't be in the pressure that I will go for a one visit and do a deal. So in China, it's all about building relationship. You spend your time, and your business will grow. But don't try to push your business. Yeah. So don't try to hasten it up. Give it the time you want. Second aspect is when you are negotiating, don't ask for the lowest price. So that's something which we want. Dil mange more. But if you ask for the lowest price, you will get that quality. Yeah. So you should understand what is that level you want, and sort of limit yourself. And of course flexibility. So open to experiment with food, using chopstick. So do everything. What is show that flexibility.
All right. With that, I would like to conclude today's event. I would really like to thank both our panelists. Professor Devraj, you gave in a lot of input about your personal experience and insights into what young kids should look for in China. And Santosh, you gave us some hard facts as well as some really nice personal insights about what you think about China. You were very incisive. So thank you both so much for attending this and sharing your personal experiences as well as your thoughts on how young people can find new opportunities in China. And hopefully on this day of Makar Sankranti, let the sun shine in and maybe make our futures of India and China brighter.